And a very warm welcome to this webinar. We're beginning to look for the next 40 minutes or so at how to use something like this, a smartphone to shoot video. That's the plan. It's becoming increasingly popular, and indeed Claire Foy, who is the star of The Crown and more recently First Man, appeared in a movie called The Unsane, which apparently was shot entirely on an iPhone. A couple of things housekeeping wise. If you are new to joining us, you probably already discovered at the bottom of your screen there are a series of controls. Hopefully by now you've all found where to type chat, and Liz is going to keep an eye on that for us over the next hour. So if you've got thoughts or suggestions or things to share, please put it in chat. If you have a question, something specific that you want us to tackle, we'll set aside some time at the end of the webinar. So if you can write the questions in the Q&A box, then we can tackle those, as I say, towards the end, and hopefully give you the answers that you need. So that's the plan for the next hour or so. We will definitely be finished by 1 o'clock. So I've got some bits and pieces to share with you. So that is what we're going to start with. And here we go. I wanted to start with just whetting your appetite, really, give you a taste of, if you haven't already used your smartphone, what you can achieve. So while I was researching this particular webinar, I had a look at the site Vimeo, which is a sort of alternative to YouTube, and I came across this Minute. So it's a travelogue of a couple's journey to and holiday in Dubai, all shot on an iPhone. So this is the sort of thing you can strive for. So that's a minute and 1 second on all shot on iPhone. Clearly some post-production, some editing in there, some additions of sound effects and atmospheric music, but a very engaging minute with absolutely no words, no captions. So I thought it was a really good way of introducing the subject. Okay, here's what I plan to try and cover with you in the next 40 minutes or so. I'd like to say at the start, this is an introduction to the basics. We are not going to be turning you into Steven Spielberg. The plan for today is to whet your appetite, to encourage you, if you're not already using your smartphone, to shoot video. And so the idea is that we will have a look at preparation, what you should be thinking about before you go out with your phone. We'll look at format and settings. We'll look at the sort of equipment you'll need. And then the two sort of really major basic things, making your pictures as stable as possible and getting as good a sound as you can. Both of those are crucial. And then finally, we'll have a brief look at editing and the sorts of programs you can use to do that. If you'd like something specific, having watched today's introduction, then do let us know, because we have a number of webinars planned for the early part of 2019. And if there was something specific that you'd like some more detail in, then that might be an opportunity to cover that detail for you. Okay, so let's have a look at the basics, and pretty fundamentally, you'll want to know what you're going to go out to shoot and why. And much of that is driven by what the end use of your video will be. So there will be a different set of criteria if you plan to put it on a big screen, perhaps in a church. It'll be different again if you're going to only use it on social media. It might be different again if you were doing something for a website, or a combination of those. So it's pretty important to have some sort of idea about what in your mind's eye you want to come back with before you set out. And that really is all about, you know, what's the audience? We've identified some of the communication channels that you might be using. Generally speaking, younger people watch video much more than older people on the web and on social media. So it's quite a good way to connect with young people if that's one of your target audiences. It's becoming the social media driver. You can't go onto Facebook or Twitter these days without seeing video almost everywhere. And indeed, already video is responsible for about 75% of all internet traffic. That figure is going to climb to over 80% of all internet traffic by 2021, according to one of the forecasts I've seen from one of the internet giants. So pretty important that if you're not already using video, that you perhaps put your toe in the water and have a go. The other thing to say about video, just like photographs, is that if you are using video at a particular or videoing a particular event or something that involves people, it's pretty important that they know beforehand or at the start of the event that that is your plan and where you plan to use any video that you shoot, and to get their permission, or at least give them the permission to opt out. So that's something to bear in mind all the time. And the other thing to say, of course, is children, permissions around children get more complicated. So you'll need to be doubly careful if your event is about children. So some practicalities before you set out. And the first, of course, is clearly charge the phone to its utmost extent, make sure it's got 100%, and then think about clearing some of the memory. Video is extremely hungry when it comes to your camera's memory. So if you've got a phone that has got 120 gigs of memory, you probably don't need to worry. If it's got 64 or less, then you probably need to think about clearing as much as you can off it before you go out for a day's filming. And by that I mean copy across to your computer all your photographs and any existing video that you might have, because you'll need to have as much available to you as possible, particularly if it's going to be a long day's filming. The next thing to do is clean the lens. We handle these things all the time, and I don't know whether you can actually see it, but my lens is up here, and it's very easy to put a fingerprint over it. And if you do, you'll get a horrible smudgy photograph. Video will look like you shot it through Vaseline. So very important before you go out, clean the lens and make it as ready as possible. We've talked about this already. Know what you want or need to come back with and what order you want to shoot it in, because if you shoot it in the order that you see it in your mind's eye, your editing at the end of the day will be a lot easier than if you're just shooting randomly and thinking, right, now I've got to pull this lot together in some sort of story. So again, forethought and planning before you go out. And the last thing to do is make sure that when you are filming, you fill the screen, by which I mean, if you look at this photograph that I took of the ordnance in Europe, it might work as some sort of setup shot to establish our characters, but in terms of video, it's hardly filling the screen. That's a picture of our ordnance filling the screen. People are really only interested in this bit. We don't often, unless it's athletics, need to see people's legs. This is the bit that's important. So concentrate on the upper half of the body. And the other thing to say about filling the screen is don't rely on the zoom most of our camera phones will zoom in and zoom out, but the quality of the zoom is not great. And whether you like it or not, you'll get a much better finished product if you get close to people when you're filming them rather than trying to film them from a distance. The end results will be so much better. Okay, so what sort of equipment might you need? I'm going to come out of this for a moment and show you a box of bits and pieces that I have in front of me. The first thing that you will probably want is a power pack. Memory, the video is very demanding of your phone's batteries. And once you've shot for a while, you'll discover that the battery life of your phone has been degraded quite noticeably. So you may well need something that looks like this. This is a power pack. You charge it up and then it will charge other things. And if you're going to be doing a lot of filming, particularly in a day, then having something like that to recharge the phone, or at least be able to plug it in over lunch, whatever, be aware that video is extremely hungry when it comes to your battery life. What else will you need? Well, you'll need something to help you make sure that your shots are as steady as possible. I've used this little tripod on a number of occasions. It's great for sitting on desks or on filing cabinets or wherever you need to have a nice steady base. And then at the top here, there is a 3-pound holder which the phone goes in. I'll try and put it in for you. There we go. And it's a nice steady base, so that even if you're having to move around, you've got something to hang on to, and that will help the shake. The other thing to do when you are filming, if you're having to use something like this, is to sort of tuck your elbows in, because that again will help keep this sort of fairly steady. And if you're filming yourself, clearly you're going to be turning around and doing it this way around. But something like this, this is, you know, £5 worth. There are slightly more sophisticated ways of steadying a camera, and if I quickly just show you a page that I had found on the website earlier. Can I see the top of the page? Here we go. So here are some other steady cams that you can find. These I quite like. They work quite well. They're called handheld rigs for phones. You can see how the phone sits usually in some sort of clamp. And the nice thing about both of this sort of setup is that you can put a microphone and indeed a light if need be on the same thing. Those are slightly more expensive than the one I've just shown you, but it's another way to go. So that's one of the things that you'll certainly need to consider. If you are thinking that you are going to be able to get away doing all your filming like this, then I beg you to perhaps think again. So that's about bracing you and your camera. The other thing you're going to definitely need to think about is the microphone. A little later on, I'm going to play you an example of shooting a piece of video and using the microphone that's built into the camera, and then immediately follow it with something that was shot with a proper microphone plugged in. And this is the second piece of kit that I think you really should think about. You'll need a converter. So the first thing to think about is what sort of microphone you might need. The choices are twofold, really. There's something like this, which is a little lapel microphone, and it has a catch at the top, and it will clip onto shirts, collars, wherever you need it. These little things tend to be what's known in the trade as omnidirectional. That means that whichever way they're up, they'll still catch sound. So don't feel that you have to have a microphone that sits this way up if it's omnidirectional. It works just as well the other way up. The problem you face is that microphones come with one set of jacks, and you want to plug them into the headphone jack of your computer, of your phone. If I tip that around, you can see the two do not go automatically into each other. You will need some sort of converter. It can be really cheap and cheerful. We looked around on sites like Amazon today, and it's very easy to buy a lapel microphone with a very long lead and a converter at the bottom end, which allows you to plug it into the headphone jack of your phone. And that might be a really good way to go. It's not the only way to go. This is a microphone built just for the job, because what it's got at the end is the converter. So that end will go into a headphone jack. The clever stuff clearly happens in the box. And the nice thing about this one is that you can also plug in a headphone or an earpiece, so you can hear what sort of sound you're getting. And that's quite an elegant option. The other advantage of a handheld microphone is that if you're going to be doing interviews, you can pass it much more easily between you as the interviewer and your interviewee. Something you can't do if you've just gone with a lapel microphone. So again, horses for courses. What do you need to do most often? You may find this is quite a good compromise between the lapel and the final thing I have to offer you, which is something that looks like this. Now, this is a converter, but it's a converter for, if I hold it into the light, you can see that that is a professional microphone jack. If I tip it round, I hope you can just about see that on your screen. So this is the 3-pin round plug that you may well find on the microphones in public spaces, parish halls, microphones in churches, whatever. And so you could plug that microphone into this box and then plug that end into your phone, and you will get very good sound from that. This little box cost, I think, £15. Go online. You know what you're likely to need in terms of pieces of equipment, but in order of priority for me, buy yourself a good microphone to start with. Doesn't have to be really expensive, but people will be prepared to put up with poor camera work and shaky camera work. What they won't put up with is poor sound. So a good microphone is your first priority. Your second priority, as far as I'm concerned, is some way to stabilize your camera when you're filming, because that will help you enormously. So let's go back over all of that. We've done that one. Extra power pack. Brace yourself and the phone. And the final piece of kit that you may end up needing is an additional app on the phone. Most phones these days come with some sort of app that allows you to shoot video. And that might be fine. However, if you're going to be doing this on a regular basis, can I again suggest to you that you might do a bit of exploration into a specific app for shooting movies. I use on my iPhone something called Movie Pro. That one you do have to pay for. There are free ones out there for the iPhone. If you're on Android, we've used Open Camera very successfully, and that is free. And there's one called Cinema 4K, which is also free and useful. Why do you need something over and above what the manufacturer of your phone has already provided? The answer is it gives you a lot more control over the end product, starting with things like how big a file, what format are you going to be shooting in. It also handles things like lights and poor lighting visibility much better. It helps with something called white balance. That is, particularly under artificial light, whites can become very yellowy, and that, of course, will affect skin color as well. So white balance is quite important, and these sorts of apps will certainly help you with that. And the last thing is that quite often they have a sort of element of stabilization about them, so that if you do come back with a slightly shaky picture, the app will help settle that for you. Again, you don't have to pay a fortune for these, but it's worth at least exploring them rather than just relying necessarily on what is on the phone.
Could I just chip in here? We've had a very interesting question, well, a point being made by Stephen. He says that iPhone 8 and higher have no jack. I'd heard this, that you have to do everything by Bluetooth. So, yes, it's one of the latest of the fangled ways of messing up our lives. You have to use Bluetooth. So if anybody's used Bluetooth for all of these things, it'd be interesting to know what your experience is of that. But thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. Yes. Gosh, talk about making life more difficult for ourselves. Yes, that's going to take a bit of getting round.
We've got to work on that. We've got to come up with some solutions for that one.
She makes promises I've got to keep. That's the problem. Okay. Let's just underline some of those things that we were saying when we were looking at the equipment that you might consider using. I shot this walking around the house yesterday, and it's to demonstrate really how awkward and how uncomfortable watching unstabilized video can be. I walked between two rooms, and this is the result that I got. Getting steady video is not only important, it's also quite difficult, particularly if you're on the move. Watching shaky video is a very uncomfortable experience, isn't it? One of the reasons you need to steady up is that shaking becomes very difficult to watch after a while, particularly if it's extended. That's not to say that you shouldn't try and get movement into your videos. If you watch any television or movies these days, it's all about movement, and movement is good. If you just do single shots and everything is still in every shot, it won't be as exciting as something that is moving, tracking, getting closer, pulling away, whatever it is. So movement is great, but it's got to be controlled, and that's one of the issues that you're going to have to at least come to grips with. The other thing is, as I said, getting good sound. I don't know, you may or may not have seen a promotional video I made promoting this particular webinar, which is on various locations. And I had to record it 2 or 3 times. I had to record it about 10 times to get.
Let's be honest, we tried to do it outside, but discovered the sound was really tricky.
Yes, absolutely. So I brought the camera back inside, brought it into my office, plugged in a professional microphone and tried to record the trailer. What I hadn't failed to do was plug the microphone in correctly. So the first piece of video you're going to see is me being recorded directly by the phone. So this is the sound you would get if you just used the microphone in the phone. YouTube has become the second largest search engine in the world. It only underlines what a juggernaut video has become. Predictions suggest that by 2021, video will be responsible for over 80% of all internet traffic. Thin, very unexciting, and I was relatively close to the camera. I was only about 30 centimetres, 40 centimetres, about a foot. But even so, because the microphone is at the back of the camera, it sounded truly horrible. When I plugged a microphone in, this was the result. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. It only underlines what a juggernaut video has become. Predictions suggest that by 2021, video will be responsible for more than 80% of all internet traffic. I hope that's made the point. If you spend money on anything, spend it on a microphone, because you'll get a far more polished result that people will be prepared to watch, because we want to hear what people are saying and we can put up with shaky camera work. So built-in microphones for these smartphones have significant drawbacks. We've already talked about your options. You can have a little lapel or a stick microphone. There are other microphones, and depending on how exciting you want to get, You may choose eventually to buy something like this. This is known as a gun mic. It's very directional, but if you pop it on top of something like one of those mounts that we saw earlier, it's a very good option in terms of being able to pick up voices at a distance, so that if you can't have cable running to your a mic cable running to your interviewee, that's another option. And we've already talked about the need to buy something that converts across that gap as far as jacks are concerned. Okay, so let me try and underline that everything I've said already is actually being used in the real world. For those of you not in the UK, the BBC's flagship Saturday night programme at the moment is a thing called Strictly Come Dancing. And they do quite a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And we were watching a show this week which had a new guest judge. And part of the sort of warm-up for that was to see him in action behind the scenes as everybody was getting ready to go out and do the show. So you're watching the man in the red T-shirt and the equipment that he's using to record his piece.
What's up, y'all? I remember being where you guys all are, right? I'm gonna be kind. Yeah. Just enjoy every moment. You're gonna have good moments, you're gonna have bad moments, but trust me, enjoy it, okay?
So right at the end there's a lady holding a phone on a Steadicam, and he's linked to it by a microphone. Interestingly, they'd thought about it beforehand, because when they split those screens, the long, tall one on the left was the video that she had shot of him in that dressing room. So again, it's about thinking about it before you go out. Very interesting. But as I say, everybody has thought about it and has got the equipment. Okay, so the next thing to talk about is the sort of technical bit. This is not as daunting as it sounds, particularly if you invest in one of those camera apps that we were talking about earlier on. Realistically, you have two choices in terms of the size of video you are going to shoot. So this is known as high definition is 1080 HD. And in pixels, the screen size, that is 1920 by 1080. And although there are now bigger formats, 4K, realistically, the stuff that you and I are going to be doing at its very best needs to be 1080 HD. So if you are shooting stuff that is going to go onto a big screen at a venue, if you are shooting video that is going to appear on a big television at a conference or in a display area, if you are shooting stuff that eventually might go on to DVD or Blu-ray, then you definitely want to shoot in as big a format as you can, and 1080 HD will cover you for all of those things. The other thing about shooting in HD, 1080 HD, is that it's easier then to scale it down if you need to. What you can't do is scale stuff up because there just isn't the digital information. So if in doubt, go big. But the drawback of that, of course, is that it will take much more memory on your phone, and it will also drain the phone's battery much faster. So that's the drawback of going big. Your other realistic option is what's known as 1280 by 720, sometimes referred to as 720 HD. So this is smaller, therefore less memory, less battery, and is fine for things like YouTube. In fact, YouTube's algorithms actually bite down on any video to make it that size. They reformat it to the 720 size. However, if you put it up at 720, YouTube's fine with it. There are smaller versions, there are smaller ratios, and the only time really to consider shooting in those ratios is if you are shooting specifically for something like a website and know that you want 2 or 3 small examples on a page, then shooting smaller is probably an option you might consider at that stage. But usually you want to be either 720 or 1080 depending on the end product, and that again is about thinking about it before you go out and setting your camera app to record in the format that you want. Almost everything we do these days is widescreen. Most televisions, unless it's a very old television, are now widescreen, which is a ratio of 16:9, occasionally 16:10. The old digital data projectors that you may still come across run at 4:3. So that's known as a standard format. The problem you will have is that if you, for any reason, shoot in a standard format and then put it on a widescreen, is that you get those black bars down the sides. Usually, again, as I say, everything you shoot will already be automatically in 16:9, but it's just be worth being aware of it. And the last thing to say is, do you shoot this way round or do you shoot this way round? So landscape versus portrait. If you are shooting for something that you know is only ever going to live on social media, it is never going to go anywhere other than Facebook or Twitter or something similar, then you can shoot this way round because everybody's comfortable with shooting like this. You see people with their phones out shooting like this, and vertical is fine, particularly on social media, because that's the way that pages are shaped. For almost everything else, can I recommend that you go landscape? Because the problem you get is if you shoot in portrait and then put it on a big screen, again, you get those horrible bars down the side. Quite often on news bulletins these days, we see handheld video being shot by a bystander, and they've shot it this way round. And so the television people have to put something down the side to make it fit their screen. So think about it. Don't automatically hang on like this. Your instinct should be to go this way round, unless you know it's only ever going to live on social media, in which case you can probably get away like this. Good, good, good. Almost there, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk briefly now about editing, and then we'll tackle your questions and comments as you have them. It may be okay to put up raw footage as you shoot it. It might be fine, but we become very sophisticated audiences these days, and we expect an element of polish. So it might be fine just to whack something up on YouTube and say, you know, this was our carol concert or whatever, but you probably want to do slightly more than that. And the slightly more might just be to tidy up the front and the back, the start and the finish. So you start with a bang and you finish with a bang, and there's just a bit of getting rid of the extraneous stuff at the start and the end that you don't need. And that's really simple and can be done even on the phone itself. It's probably easier to do it on a big screen, but it can be done on the phone itself.
If somebody's never done editing on a phone before, is it easy enough to do it, do you think? Do the apps walk you through it in such a way that you feel confident? I
think there's an element of you'll have to suck it and see. Usually the answer to that is yes. Again, I would underline that it's probably easier not to edit on a phone, but to edit on a bigger screen, because you just have much more control with a mouse than you will with your finger. But really all you're doing usually is dragging your finger in to say, I want the thing to start here and please lose this bit, and similarly at the other end. I've got to be honest, I've never, ever edited on the phone. So I may be saying something that's complete nonsense, but that would be my, my understanding. If you can get it back to a bigger screen, you'll probably save yourself a lot of grief. Does that help?
I think it does. Other people might want to comment. I do know people who have done a lot of editing exactly on their phone, and I would just say I think it's one of those things that it needs a bit of practice. Don't give up because it's tricky the first time, and with the using of one's finger to do things is probably more difficult than getting one of the little pointy, I think there's a little rubber thing on the end. I can't remember what it's called. The pen, a special pen to enable that process to work more easily. We've got some further comments we'll come to at the end about the no jack phones.
Oh, great. Okay, that's good. Okay, so the other advantage with editing on a screen, and particularly if you're editing in a piece of software where it is built for editing, is that you might well be able to add captions to your production which help identify people, for instance. And again, those tend to be very simple, drag and drop usually. Type in a name and away you go, and it just adds that element of polish to your finished production that can be very helpful and can begin to bring your video out of the pack because there's just so much around at the moment. The other thing we're seeing a lot more of these days, and again something you can add at the editing stage, is people are captioning the whole piece, and that's because on social media increasingly people are watching video with the sound turned down or you know, nothing to be able to hear it. I've noticed that watching Channel 4's feed on Twitter, which is all video based, they caption all the words of all their clips so that you can watch a talking head on your screen and read what he or she is actually saying. And again, if we're getting into good practice, that's not a bad way to go, particularly if you're doing something that is representative of the organization that you are working for or alongside. It shows that you've got the good practice to be able to put up the text. It's not absolutely essential, but it's a very nice touch. So here's where you might want pen and paper if you haven't already got it. Here are some suggestions of edit programs that you might try to get some good results. Again, I can only speak for the iPhone and iPad on the right-hand side of the screen. For Apple users, the built-in editor is called iMovie, and it's excellent. Most of what I've shown you today was edited and created using iMovie. For Android users, there are 3 recommended suggestions. Research suggests that these are good options for you. The only one I can speak to is Adobe Premiere, which has a pro version. This is a free version, Adobe Premiere Clip. But you may well try the other 2. Go on and have a try, have a play with them, see which ones you get along with best. With all of these things, the software will have supporting videos to show you how to sort of get started with them. So if you're in any doubt, have a look at those sorts of things. So shall I leave that up for another second or 2 while you scribble those down?
In the chat boxes, we've had iMovie being said as being extremely good. Richard does edit on the phone.
So oh, right.
I've got somebody who does that very well. And Rosalie says that iMovie is an excellent thing for the iPhone user.
Yep. Yes, I would absolutely concur. It's a fabulous piece of program. Okay, let's move on. We can come back to that if you need to. So the answer then is, you know, you've done it, you've got it all titled, you know, what next? Well, the answer is you're going to export it and you're going to use it. That's the whole point. So that's getting it off the phone and onto a computer, or off the phone and posted on a website or whatever. You're probably going to export in a format called MP4, known occasionally as MPEG-4. It's the equivalent of JPEG. So in photograph terms, we tend to talk about JPEGs. Well, MPEG-4 is the movie equivalent. It's the universally recognized format for movies. And if you are editing in a program, you should be able to export whatever it is that you're doing as MP4. Certainly YouTube and other sites, most websites will comfortably deal with MPEG-4. If you're shooting entirely on Apple-based products, your end product might be a .mov file. It's a QuickTime file. It's again, reasonably universally recognized, although occasionally you do run into problems if you are shooting and exporting on MPEG. There are others, AVI and Windows Media Video are other options. YouTube recognizes and will take all of these formats. As I said earlier, they will squash it down to 1280 by 720 if you have shot in 1080 high definition, the bigger version. But again, you don't need to worry about that. YouTube will do it automatically for you. Good. Well, I wanted to finish with, if you like, a bit of a bang before we get to your questions. Again, when I was researching this, I came across a final screen. Why bother? It's great fun. It's incredibly good for telling stories. Video will, pictures aren't bad, stills aren't bad, but if you can tell your story with a video, it will just be so much more engaging for your title, for your audience. It really is the way to go. We have become very sophisticated audiences. We're exposed to a huge amount of media over a day. And in a sense, if you're representing an organization, whether that be a chaplaincy, whether that be a diocese, whatever, these days, we almost, as an audience, expect you to be able to produce a bit of good video. It doesn't have to be long, but good video. And as I say, by 2021, over 80% of all internet traffic will be video-based. So I came across this 2 minutes of video today. What if this was the record of your next major event? This is an event that took place in New York City in 2016. It clearly is a creative young people's week. They seem to have had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's time to shoot now. Here's time to shoot. You gotta shoot.
Se pierde otro rumbo más en la tierra. Todos somos igual.
Looked like a lot of fun, didn't it? Okay, that is us done in terms of that. So questions and comments for the remainder of the session. And what have you got, Liz?
Well, various different things people have suggested. We've got one question. Any recommendations for lenses that attach to a smartphone's camera to improve upon the capabilities of the smartphone? I know I've seen a lot of these advertised online. It's always got the perfect gadget for taking you attach it to the lens on your phone, and then it takes fabulous pictures across sort of something 3 miles away. I've never bought one. Has anybody bought one of those? If you've tried one of those attachments, could you just pop it into make a note in the chat box and tell us, because as I haven't, and they might be really, really good. But they're quite popular, but it's a bit of an investment if you don't know whether they're going to work or not. I think that's quite interesting. While people might be thinking about that, the suggestion for this, let me just see if I can find the question. Wait a minute, answered. About using a dongle. There's a special dongle that you can use. This came up in the chat box. There's a thing called a dongle which plugs into the lightning socket and converts to a jack, and that would probably work for the microphone system.
That's for the new phones that don't have a headphone
the new
jack.
Phones that don't have a headphone socket. So Marilyn said they've got an M-PAL clip-on lens, 20 times macro, 0.36 super wide angle. Only use them for photos. Well, that's used for fisheye. Only used for photos so far. So that's interesting, because they might work, these special lenses might work for photos, but not work for video. And we'd love you, Marilyn, to try it and then possibly let us know whether it works. Do you find it's really successful for photos? Have you got a better picture as a result? That would be really interesting to know.
We'll give her a moment to respond. Have you anything else?
iPhone converter. No, I don't think there's any other questions that just there, but people are responding to Marilyn's suggestion.
Yeah. The other thing to say is that, I mean, in a sense, this is entry-level video. So smartphones are very much, I mean, don't get me wrong, the cameras in these get better and better all the time, but there comes a stage when, if you're really into video and want to do it justice, and give yourself more options, then there will come a time when you need to step up from a smartphone to either a video camera or a stills camera that also shoots video. The joy of that, of course, is that you do have a professional lens on the end, and the depth of field and all those sorts of things come into to play. This was about introducing you to the basics. Yes, that would be the next step up.
A couple of comments about editing. Christopher said very sensibly, if you edit on the phone, is there a risk of deleting something you can't get back?
Yes, absolutely.
Always. That's one of the risks, isn't it? If you do edit on the phone, you suddenly want the bit that you've just lost. And Richard says he edits on the phone. He keeps an intro on the phone to add, and then when he says, when I land, the video is ready to go. For simple things, so he does everything on the phone, so it's all ready. And Rosemary's come back with some. Macro. Marion says that macro is fantastic, but your phone case may be in the way of your lens. That's a very good point if you attach one of those little lenses. Rosemary, who I know does a lot of material, website-y type material. She says, I would suggest you don't try and upload your video directly to your website. Better to have it as a YouTube channel, such as or Vimeo, and upload from there and then link. I think that's a really good point, Rosemary. Don't try and put it straight onto your website. It makes things very complicated. You need to have an intermediary in Diocese in Europe, where there is a YouTube channel that we're trying to build up. I know a lot of other people have their own YouTube channels as well. But that's a really good, important thing to remember.
Yep.
Anybody else got any really good ideas that other people might want to try? I mean, obviously some of you are doing quite a lot of this sort of thing, but for some other folk, they've never tried it at all. So we just, as a beginner.
We have a couple of late questions, so shall I begin to tackle that? The first is from John, who said we spoke about YouTube. What about Facebook? Are the rules the same for this? Again, Facebook will manipulate the video that you load to it, and again, if you're doing that directly from the phone, you're going to be there a while unless you're in a 4G area or you've got an internet connection, because again, all that processing will take time. But yes, Facebook will do the work for you, and it will have standards which, if you really wanted to find out what the ultimate format is, if you go to Facebook and do the search, you'll be able to find it. Any webinar or resources on how to think about lighting when shooting a video inside, like a...
yes, I think that's Pauline has just pointed out, because they can't see the question so
right.
very clearly.
Okay, so Yuki, I hope I pronounced that correctly, says he wants to know what resources there might be to think about lighting when shooting a video inside a rather dark place like a church building. There are some solutions. Excuse me, I'm going to move a light from over here to bring it over there. So give me a second.
We're all plunged into darkness now. We can't see you. Yes,
okay. So yes, there are lights. I bought this for a relatively small amount. I can't remember how much. It's used as sort of news gathering light, and you pop it on top of. Well, I put it on top of a camera. If you had a camera mount like the ones we looked at earlier, you could mount it on that. I won't turn it on because it would just dazzle you. The nice thing about this is that it has a range of light from yellow to blue, and it would certainly help if you were working in a dark environment like a church. And it has to be said, there's no getting away from the fact that sometimes taking your video outside is the best thing you can do. But there are lights available, and any light that you can get is always helpful. So I will pop that one back on. I won't plug it back in now because
yes,
time is tight, but yeah,
it's got very dark. But I think that the use of lighting and experimenting is really important. It makes a big difference. Sometimes having one of those big reflective silver discs to bounce light back at the face can really help, because it means the face of the person that you are talking to can be seen. I think Nick's going to rummage in his little hidey hole there and see if he can find one. I think they're little bits that improve the result of what you are trying to do. Yes, you can just use your phone, and when you'll start getting frustrated that the light isn't right, and if you can go outdoors. This particular piece of equipment that he's just fighting with is a reflector that's silver on one side, and is that the one that's white or gold on the other side? I can't remember.
This one's black on one side, but it does have a gold
gold
interior.
Because this changes the skin tone when you're using it, and it bounces light back up.
I'm trying to catch my other light to light my face, but there you go.
Yes.
But yeah, these things are very useful. But again, they work also very well outside. That if you've got to light a face, and the only way of doing it is with the sun behind the face, then something like this is relatively useful. And again, not wildly expensive.
No, very inexpensive. And the question is, are there other colours other than white? Yes, silver, gold. But remember, the more bits of kit you have, the more you'll need somebody else to help you. Because if you've got one of those reflectors, you need to have somebody to hold it. If you've got a handheld microphone, you might need somebody else to hold the mic. In the olden days, when television news crews would go out, there would be a camera person, a sound person, an electrician, a spark for the lights, a director and a television producer, as well as the interviewer asking the questions. You'd have a 6-person crew. Now you get one person going. So that's the way that equipment has changed, but it's also a level of the different expectations we have and what is acceptable visually. We don't need all of that kit all of the time.
But it makes...
I do hope we get lots more people trying to make videos, because I want to receive, from the Diocese in Europe, I want to see lots of exciting videos for our YouTube channel now. And we look forward to hearing what other people are trying and succeeding with.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Pauline, the question has come up here. Twitter seems to limit the size of a video. Is there any way around that?
No idea is the honest answer. I'm surprised, but I'm very happy to believe, Pauline, that there's a duration limit. The other thing to say is, less is quite often more with videos. Nobody's going to sit through 20 minutes, not unless it's spectacularly good. Aim for 3-4 minutes absolute most, unless it's stunning. Let's go back to that video we finished with. They compressed 5 days of creativity into 2 minutes. That should be your target, and less is definitely more, because we all have very short attention spans, particularly on social media these days. So keep it short. And make it episodic if need be. Break it down into nice bite chunks, and keep coming back with a new chunk, and build your social media following that way.
Lovely. Anybody else got anything else they'd like to that they've tried that they think other people would like to benefit? Oh, Corinne says that video was very loud though. It may be just the way we got it set up, Corinne, to be honest with you. It may just have been that Nick has got the volume turned up. And the
other thing to say is it's not permissible just to steal music to go with your videos. Either it's got to be your music, or you've got to have rights to it. You cannot just choose something from the top 40. Otherwise you will get a very large bill from somebody.
Yes, Karine, you can adjust the sound in the setup on the phone, and in the editing, when you're doing editing, you can adjust the way the sound balances, and that's much easier to do if you do it on a computer than if you do it on your phone. But yes, all of these things, it's a collection of parts, and you stop them all together and you can adjust different levels. So have an experiment.
Yeah, though it must be said, getting sound right on location makes your life so much easier when you get it back. If you've got poor sound, there's not much you can do about it when you get back to the office. And be particularly careful if you're outside and it's a windy day. You will need something like this over the end of your microphone. It's a windshield, and it'll just cut down that terrible wind noise. And even the lapels these days have windshields. So make sure you pop one of those on if you're shooting outside.
And Richard has pointed out we can Google royalty-free music. That's absolutely right, Richard. You can, but do that. Don't take a fabulous track by Beyonce because it's top of the charts or whatever we do, and then put it on without somebody spotting it and finding you a lot of money.
Great. Well, we promised you that this would all be done in an hour. My clock says that it's now 57 minutes past. So unless anybody has got any other real issues, we'll end it here. If there is something you would like us to consider for a future webinar, please do let us know. And can I just say that the next video webinar that we'll be doing in this particular series is happening on the 7th of November, and again at the same time, so that's 12 o'clock in the UK, 1 o'clock in Europe, and we'll be doing a look at design for things like magazines, newspapers, websites. We're looking at design that works, so giving you some fundamentals of good design. In the meantime, thank you very much for coming. We hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you the next time round. Bye-bye.
Bye.